So the Rio Grande Valley humans are the problem and have been. The Rio Grande Valley was the last stronghold for ocelots, I believe. That delta system really was interesting. A mix of tanglements and vines, although there were prairies and patches of prairies and stuff in the Rio Grande Valley. There's still a lot of potholes. If you look at a aerial photo, it's just full of potholes in northern part of the Rio Grande Valley that had water in them and surrounded by dense brush. Mr. Frank Yturria's ranch had probably the last two vestiges of what was called the El Jardin, the garden in Spanish, but he had two tracts of brush. Each was about 200, 250 acres. There was this wall, extremely dense brush. And I don't know of any other place like that within 15 miles of that patch. And so when the Rio Grande Valley was recognized for its importance for agriculture, that was the first places to be cleared. And it's kind of interesting that you have the delta, so you have all the fertile soils that the dense brush thrives on. So you have this matrix of potholes, water, entangling brush that was penetrable. But the ocelots probably had a pretty large population in the delta there. I guess about three factors that really opened it up. The railroad in 1904 went from southeast Texas down to the valley. And that, for the first time, made a connection for people to go from the valley back and forth. And that preceded the highway by at least, I think, 20 years. I think the highway, what is now Highway 77, wasn't developed until the 1920s or 1930s. So that was the second major human factor that allowed access to the crops, the potential crops of the Rio Grande Valley for potential markets. So you had a railroad train and you had finally a road, but maybe another third, maybe the most important, was the opening of the ship channel. And then I believe that was in the 1930s, possibly. So there you could export crops around the world, or especially around the United States. So finally, the economic incentive was there to exploit the soils and the great climate of the Rio Grande Valley and grow a huge variety of crops, which have occurred since then. And it rapidly changed. 1930s through the 60s, a lot of that brush was converted fairly rapidly for farm fields at that time. And I like to eat like everybody else, so I don't mind the crops and the food that was produced, but it was at the expense of a rich diversity of life that occurred in the Rio Grande Valley, and ocelots and jaguarundi in particular.